Niaje, welcome to my channel once again. My name is Winnie Quach. Today I will be discussing on how you conduct a site visit, reconnaissance, which is also called a recce in the events world. Now, how to conduct an effective site visit, reconnaissance, or recce. A recce is very important when you want to determine the suitability of your venue or location. Why we normally conduct a recce is to determine that. So what normally happens is, as an events manager or coordinator or project manager, you will receive what we call a brief or an approved plan or an approved concept. So a client will call you, or your account manager will tell you they want to hold a concert or an event at a certain location. What you immediately need to do is plan for a site visit or a recce. And there are a few things that you need to consider even when you're going for this recce. Number one is to prepare in advance. So you need to be able to print out your design or your plan or basically your proposal of what they intend to achieve. You need to carry this with you when you're going to the site visit. Of course, things like transport and calling ahead to just tell the venue owner that you're coming are things that you need to do in advance. So you will be at the venue, but at the same time you need to ask yourself, who are the people that need to be there? So if there are key suppliers that need to quote and they cannot do this over the phone, you need to make sure that they're there with you at the site visit. You need to make sure that the venue representative or the owner or the key decision maker is there at the venue. There are some of them that you will have to have clients there with you. Others you will carry your immediate supervisor or even your tech person, who is very important, because when you're going to a site visit and you're determining the suitability of the event, you'll be doing a lot of measuring, you'll be doing a lot of qualification and disqualification of the ground based on your concept, based on your engagement plan, and based on what you want to achieve ultimately. The other thing that you also need to consider are the tools that you need. So remember, this is the first, or should I say, the initial site visit. So this is not it is not the same as a risk assessment. I'll be talking about this later on in a different video. So there are a few things that you need to carry with you. For example, are you looking at carrying a tape measure? So there are things that we use in terms of measuring. Are you looking at carrying a phone? So your phone needs to be charged because you need to be able to take photos of the site. You need to be able to record. If you're having a meeting with a person who would rather have eye contact when they're explaining to you what they require, or client will be there and you don't want to be scribbling down on your notes, on your notebook. So you want to record so that you can refer back to your recording on what was discussed and agreed. And also you want to be able to capture a report at the end of it all of what was discussed and agreed. So you need to have a phone that is full of charge. You also need to have a camera that is able to take nice photos for your design team or your production team to be able to put the layout and bring it to life in terms of the branding that you will have, in terms of the different experience points. So these are things that you need to consider when you're carrying your tools. The other tool that you also need to consider is a notebook. Of course, there are people who, you might have a phone that doesn't have charge, or you can have a phone that cannot record, and you prefer scribbling down on your notebook in terms of who was present, what was said, what actually speaks to what you want to do, the different contacts and email addresses. So a notebook is very important. For me, when I go for a site visit, I like putting down a layout plan. So when I walk in, I draw what we call a map. So I'll start at the entrance and draw my small gate, then I'll do a box, and then I will just segment it based on the plan or the objective that the client wants to achieve. And even as I'm doing the different walkthrough, I capture specific things that are what we call attention to detail, and the key things that people don't pick out, like maybe a fence that has an access point that you don't expect, or maybe a broken point. Those are the things that I note down, so that when we end up doing a risk assessment with the security team involved, those are the things that I'll ultimately highlight. The other thing that you need to consider, as I mentioned, is a measuring tool. So most of us go to venues and we cannot determine the capacity it can hold. And the internet is kind enough for us to have tools where you can just put the square meters of your venue and it's able to calculate for you the capacity of the event that it can hold. And so now you'll find that you either need a measuring tape or you can have an infrared measuring tape where you just bounce off from the different wall to the next, and it gives you the square meters or the meters of the area that you're standing at. So depending on the measuring tools that you have, and old school way how we used to do it, for example, you can find you've gone to a venue and you don't have a techie, you'll just use your feet. So you put one foot in front of the other and you just start walking and counting how many steps you have. Then this can also be converted into square meters. So if you don't have the high-tech tools to do the measuring, then you can use your feet, you can even use your hands as you move. So these are things that you can use, these are things that we've used time and time again to be able to determine the measurements. Especially if you're measuring, let's say, an event that needs to accommodate X number of tents, and you need to determine how many tents can fit there. X number of cars, and you need to determine how many cars should fit there. It's a concert and client wants 10,000 people, and maybe you're not sure. So those are the reasons as to why we measure for suitability. The other thing that you need to do is agree with the owner what you can do and what you can't do in their venue. So as much as you're paying the owner, you need to still respect that it is their property. So let's say you want to have an event and you want to bring people to sell alcohol, and the owner does not allow that. Those are things that you need to put down. There are owners that will tell you that in the neighborhood they have neighborhood associations, and there are things they do not agree to. So maybe playing music to a certain time of day, hour of the night, and the people maybe who will not entertain events that will have people dressed in a certain way coming there. So those are things that you need to agree. The owner will tell you maybe you cannot put nails through the wall in certain areas. You need to agree, and this needs to be documented so that you can not spoil the relationship you have. Remember, you will need to come back there again and again, and sometimes even when you ruin a relationship, this affects the brand that you're representing at that point in time. The other thing that you need to do, as I mentioned, the restrictions in the neighborhood. When you're finding that out, you also need to list down all the necessary licenses that you require. So you'll find that the owner of the venue does not have, maybe let's say you want to sell alcohol, do they have the license to actually do that? Let's say the owner of the venue wants you to sell food, and you go to an area like Kisumu, do you know that you need to involve the public health? And it's very complicated. The way you'd hold an event, maybe let's say in Kisumu, is not the same way you will hold an event in Kakamega or Nairobi or Thika. So depending on the county you're in, you need to do your research to know what are the licenses you need, what are the requirements you need in order for you to hold the kind of event you're holding there. The other thing that we also look at is the suppliers. As I mentioned earlier, when we do a recce, as much as you're determining the suitability of the venue, you also need to get the right quotes. And some of us go ahead of ourselves and quote without taking the supplier to come and view the venue. If you're looking at putting up a stage, or you're looking at putting up let's say a dome tent, or you're looking at putting up certain lights that you've never used before, or a generator, or you want to put up a structure that you've never done before, sometimes it benefits you to call the supplier to work with you, explain to them where you want a certain thing and how you want it done, for them to actually give you the exact quote and the timeline that this would take for you to be able to honor the objectives and what is required from you. The other thing that we do is we identify early risks. As I mentioned earlier, I normally work with a notebook to just record the things that I can see that are not adding up. So this, you will note down like accessibility to the venue. Is the venue enough convenient for people? Let's say you're having a concert and you are going to invite the public. Is it convenient enough for them to come there? Is it far from the city center? Those are the things you note down. Do they have like enough fire extinguishers? But remember, this is not a risk assessment. It's for you to note down so that when you come back and you're in a group of people, you need to be ahead of them. You need to show that you were there before, and you need to show that you're in control of what is to take place. You also need to check whether the land is slightly slanted in terms of if there was a flood, which are the areas where the water would basically gather, and you're looking at, in terms of setup, where would you potentially place your stage, where would people be able to buy food from, and if the venue would be able to flood, what are the things that you need to do. So those are the small things that you basically you put down. Remember, then you will ask the owner in the presence of the security personnel so that they're able to sign off that the event is risk approved and you have the required mitigation. The other thing you need to do is do a complete walkthrough. So with the owner of the venue and maybe later the supplier and the key person that needs to be there, you need to walk through from the entry to the exit, pointing out the different experiences that you want to have. And you find that whenever you do this, it makes sure that everyone is on the same page, and it also makes sure that your team speaks the same language, and the venue owner will be able to highlight if they're not comfortable with the different things that you've done. Lastly but not least is you need to sit down after all this has been done for you to agree on what you have, how you walked through, what needs to be done, and when you will have your other meeting. Remember, it starts very small with 2 or 3 people doing the first recce, and then it grows to a team of 20 to 30 people, because later on you'll have included all your suppliers, we'll have the small supervisors to be able to coordinate, you will have a team of team leaders, you will have security who will have the different parking marshals, who will have the different head of securities. So you will start as 3, but it will end up as 20, and you always want to be in charge and in control of this particular process, because when people walk through with you and they feel like you have no idea of what you're talking about, they will either dismiss you or they will go to the next in line in terms of command. So recces are very exciting because they make us learn a lot in terms of operation and planning, but with time you get to just become an expert in this particular field. So thank you very much. This is it from me today, and in case you have any comments or there's anything you feel that I've left out or you want to add, please feel free, like, share, subscribe, and let us grow together. Asante sana, until we meet again. Thank you.